Today, we're going deep on something pretty heavy. Healing and reconciliation after genocide. It's, you think about a nation just absolutely shattered, not just buildings and, infrastructure, but emotionally, socially, how do you even begin to pick up the pieces?
It's almost unimaginable.
It is. And that's what these researchers, Irvin Staub and Lorianne Perlman, they were looking at in Rwanda after the 1994 genocide. And what's really interesting is
they were there.
They were there.
Yeah.
They weren't just kind of armchair theorists. They were
very active,
working with people, local community groups, all the way up to national leaders.
Yeah, they were really trying to make a difference, to really have an impact.
To rebuild.
Yeah.
And I think what's so powerful about this, and we say this a lot on the show, but by understanding how trauma and group dynamics work at this level, at this scale, it gives you insights into your own life, even if it's, knock on wood. Thankfully, most of us haven't been through anything like that.
Thankfully not.
But you can still see.
You can still see.
There's patterns.
Yeah, those patterns, those dynamics.
In your own life, in your own conflicts.
Absolutely, and in your own groups.
Yeah.
Groups are so powerful.
Let's get into it. What does genocide actually do to a society, to a community?
Wow. I mean, it's like a psychological earthquake.
Oh, wow.
It just shatters everything.
Yeah.
The world as you know it, it's more than just the physical destruction, right? Yeah. I mean, there's the obvious, loss of life, displacement, all of that. But it's this deep, pervasive trauma. It impacts survivors, perpetrators, and entire communities.
So we keep using this word trauma.
Right.
But for someone listening who maybe, blessedly hasn't been through something like the Rwandan genocide, what does that actually look like? How does it manifest for a person?
I think it's easy to focus on the sort of the obvious things like PTSD, nightmares, flashbacks, those kinds of things. But the impact is
deeper.
It goes way, way beyond that.
Yeah.
So imagine your entire worldview just shattered, your trust in others just completely broken. It's gone. The very foundation of how you understand the world and your place in it is just shaken to the core.
And so you're left feeling incredibly vulnerable, right?
Oh, absolutely. Vulnerable and distrustful.
Yeah, distrustful of everything.
Yeah,
and everyone. It's almost like the rug has been pulled out from under you.
Yes.
And you're just trying to...
And you're scrambling,
grasping to make sense of a world that suddenly feels...
chaotic,
and dangerous.
Yes, absolutely dangerous.
And what I thought was really interesting is that Staub and Perlman also talk about how perpetrators experience trauma too.
Yeah, they really emphasize this point, that many perpetrators, they're often trapped in this cycle of violence themselves.
Yeah.
And they might be victims of past trauma.
Right.
Or they've been exposed to these really harmful ideologies, these really toxic ways of thinking about the world.
So it's not to excuse what they did.
Of course not.
Of course not, but it's to understand.
It's to understand that,
the complexity, the layers, and that unhealed wounds on both sides make continued conflict.
More likely. Yeah.
And I think, even thinking about it in our own lives.
Yeah.
Have you ever noticed how unresolved hurt from your past can color the way you see things?
Oh, absolutely. It's like you're carrying around this invisible baggage that weighs you down and prevents you from
seeing clearly.
Yeah.
So Staub and Perlman have all this knowledge about trauma, right?
Right.
How do they actually translate that into action in Rwanda?
Well, they recognize that, the trauma of genocide is so widespread that healing, it really had to start at the community level.
At the grassroots.
Yeah, at the grassroots level. So between 1999 and 2004, they really immersed themselves in working with local community groups.
Really hands-on.
Very hands-on, yeah.
It wasn't just about writing a report and being like, here's what we found.
Exactly.
They were really in the trenches.
Yeah, in the trenches, in the thick of it.
Yeah.
And they didn't just rely on one single method. They really developed this multifaceted approach with 5 key elements.
I love that. Okay, let's break those down.
Okay.
So let's say I'm someone living in Rwanda, trying to rebuild my life. What's that first step towards healing in this framework?
Okay, so first step, you have to understand the depth of the trauma.
Okay.
Not just as a set of symptoms, but as this fundamental disruption to your sense of self, your place in the world.
Yeah.
And it's about acknowledging that pain. and finding ways to process those experiences.
So it's more than just...
It's more than treating the symptoms. It's about addressing that root cause.
Yeah. Okay, what's the next element?
So the next element is kind of interesting. It's actually learning about other genocides throughout history.
That seems counterintuitive. Why would learning about other instances of mass violence help someone heal from their own experience?
You know, it might seem strange at first, but the idea is to help people break out of that sense of isolation.
Yeah.
So it helps them to understand that genocide, it isn't a problem that's unique to Rwanda.
Right.
It's a tragic part of human history.
Right, like a pattern.
Yeah, like a pattern, this horrific pattern.
So it's about making those connections, realizing, hey, I'm not alone in my suffering.
Exactly.
This has happened.
It's happened before, unfortunately.
Unfortunately. Yeah, and so how does that connect to, like, let's say someone listening to this show who hasn't experienced anything even close to genocide? How is that relevant?
Well, you know, I think even though you might not have experienced genocide, have you ever felt like someone was trying to, like, dehumanize you, to treat you as other,
Absolutely.
to kind of strip away your humanity?
Yeah.
And so understanding this broader context of genocide, I think, helps us recognize those dangerous patterns
Yeah.
in our own lives.
In our own communities, yeah.
Exactly.
It raises that awareness
Yes.
of those subtle but harmful dynamics that can happen anywhere.
Anywhere.
So what's the third element of their approach?
So the third element is focused on basic psychological needs.
Okay.
And we all have these needs, right?
Yeah.
Security, esteem, a sense of belonging, meaning in our lives. And genocide, it just completely disrupts these
It
needs.
throws everything off.
It throws everything off, yeah.
Yeah.
And it leaves people feeling just lost and adrift.
Yeah, so healing involves like rebuilding that foundation
Rebuilding it, yeah.
individually and as a community.
As a community, absolutely.
Yeah.
It's about creating a space where people feel safe,
Safe, yeah.
valued,
Seem
seen, heard, connected to something larger than themselves.
Yeah, yeah, I love that. Okay, that leads to the fourth element, right?
Yes. So this one is about creating safe spaces for people to actually share their experiences.
We hear about safe spaces a lot these days, but what does that actually mean in this context?
It means creating an environment where people actually feel comfortable sharing their stories.
Right.
Without judgment, without fear of reprisal. And, you know, this might involve things like support groups, therapy sessions,
Yeah.
or even just informal gatherings where people can connect with others who understand what they've been through.
Yeah, because just the act of sharing,
It's powerful.
it's so powerful, and it helps people process, find meaning, rebuild those connections.
Exactly.
Okay, and the last element.
So this last element is really interesting. They realize that even those who are trying to help, even the helpers, right?
The healer.
The healers, they can be deeply affected by the trauma that they encounter.
Yeah.
And this is called vicarious traumatization, or sometimes it's called the wounded healer concept.
Interesting.
So they emphasize that self-care for helpers, it's essential.
So it's not just about focusing on the survivors, it's about making sure that the people who are working towards healing
Yes.
and reconciliation,
They're taken care of too.
they're not burning out.
Exactly.
Yeah, so Staub and Perlman gave communities this framework for healing, but did they actually see any results?
They did, and what's fascinating is they didn't just rely on anecdotal evidence or, warm fuzzy feelings.
Right.
Their research actually showed a measurable decrease in trauma symptoms among the participants.
Wow.
Plus, they observed a more positive shift in the way that Hutus and Tutsis related to each other.
That's huge.
It's huge. It wasn't just about feeling better. It was about tangible changes in behavior and attitudes.
That's incredible.
It's really encouraging.
Yeah, it's encouraging, but they didn't stop there.
They didn't.
They realized that true healing and reconciliation requires action on a bigger scale.
Yes.
So they decided to take their work to the people in power,
To the top.
to the leaders of Rwanda,
The leaders, yeah.
and that's where we'll pick up next time
Yes.
on the Deep Dive.
I can't wait.
Me neither.
This is really fascinating stuff.
It is.
It's heavy, but it's important.
It is.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, we'll see you next time.
Welcome back. Picking up where we left off, Staub and Perlman, they had some real success working with community groups in Rwanda.
Yeah, they did.
But they didn't just stop there.
They didn't.
They understood that to really make a change, you have to get to the people in power.
Right, like the top-down approach.
Yeah, the leaders. They have this incredible influence on everything.
Policy, setting the tone.
Absolutely. They shape the whole environment for whether peace can actually happen.
It's almost like, okay, we've helped individuals, communities start to heal, but now what?
Now, how do you create the conditions for it to last?
Right, exactly.
That's where the leaders come in.
So what were they hoping to achieve?
Well, a few things. First, they really wanted these leaders to understand how deep the impact of genocide really is.
Yeah, like it's not just about the immediate loss of life.
No, it's the way it just tears apart the fabric of a society.
That distrust.
The trauma, the distrust, it just echoes for generations.
It's like those ripple effects, far beyond the violence itself.
Exactly. And then they also wanted to educate the leaders, like, how does genocide even happen?
The mechanisms of it.
Yeah, the warning signs, the things that make it possible in the first place.
So it's about prevention, too.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Give them the knowledge to maybe stop it from happening again.
And they actually gave them, like, a framework for evaluating policies.
It's like a checklist, almost.
Oh, interesting.
To figure out, is this thing going to make conflict more or less likely?
That's so smart. And you know what? I'm thinking, even outside of this really intense situation, like that's a tool people could use in their own lives.
Oh, totally.
Yeah.
Your community's making a decision.
Right.
Think about it. Does this create an us versus them?
Is it silencing certain voices?
Exactly. Those are the kinds of things that can lead to problems.
Before they even blow up.
Exactly.
Wow. Okay, so that's really practical. But then there's this whole concept of shared history.
Ooh.
Which seems so simple, but after genocide,
it's anything but.
Why is that so hard?
Because after something that traumatic, everyone's got their own story.
Their own version of the truth.
Yeah, and blame and justifications, and it's a tinderbox. Yeah.
To bring those narratives together and boom.
It could explode.
And then you've got the challenge of how do you be honest about the past but still move forward?
Build a future together.
It's a tightrope walk.
So how did they even approach that with the Rwandan leaders?
Well, they used this really interesting example about violence that happened back in 1959.
Okay.
There was this Hutu uprising against Tutsi rule. Thousands died.
Right.
The question was it genocide?
So right away, you have people disagreeing.
Fundamentally, about what even happened.
How do you even start to find common ground when that's where you're at?
That's where empathy comes in.
Okay.
Not just knowing the facts, but understanding why.
The context.
Yeah, the fears, the motivations that led to those actions.
Even if those actions were horrific.
Right. It's recognizing the humanity of everyone involved.
So powerful.
It's hard, but it's necessary.
Acknowledging that history isn't always
black and white.
Yeah, lots of gray areas.
So much pain woven into those stories.
So they're working with these leaders on trauma, on policies, on this shared history idea, but then they also focus on something really specific.
Yeah.
The gacaca courts, and those were controversial.
Oh, yeah.
Can you explain what they even were?
So after the genocide, there were so many cases.
Of crimes committed.
The courts were overwhelmed. It was chaos.
Right.
So they created this community-based system, the gacaca, to try and handle it all, bring some justice.
So instead of like formal courts, it was more local.
Yeah, community-driven. But that was risky too.
How so?
Well, on the one hand, you need justice, right?
Okay, move on.
But these trials, they could also bring back all the trauma for survivors.
Reopen those wounds.
Exactly. It's like, how do you balance justice with healing? Tough question.
And Staub and Perlman, they knew there was no easy answer.
Yeah.
So they did something interesting. Instead of telling people what to do,
right,
they went to community leaders and said, let's talk about your hopes and fears about this.
So facilitating a conversation.
Exactly. What are the benefits? What are the risks? How do we minimize the harm?
I love that approach.
It's about empowerment, right?
Yeah, and this is where journalists come in.
Oh, they're crucial.
Why? What role did they play?
Well, think about it. Journalists, they shape how the public sees things.
They can either make things better or worse.
Exactly. They could inflame tensions or they could educate people.
Their reporting could impact the whole reconciliation process. Totally. And Staub and Perlman knew that.
So they worked with them.
They did workshops, seminars, helping journalists understand trauma.
How to report on it constructively.
Yeah, avoid re-traumatizing people or reinforcing bad stereotypes.
So responsible reporting, basically.
Exactly. And they had this fascinating exercise.
Yeah.
They'd give journalists these tough scenarios.
Like what?
Imagine a young man pressured into joining the Interahamwe militia.
Oh, wow.
How do you tell his story in a way that promotes understanding.
Not just demonizing him.
Right. It's going beyond good guy, bad guy.
Yeah, the nuances.
The complexities of human behavior, the social pressures.
Even in the midst of something as horrific as genocide.
It's challenging.
So they were pushing journalists to go deeper.
Deeper beyond the easy narratives.
Wow. And it wasn't just print, they did radio too, right?
Yeah.
Why was that so important?
Well, a lot of people in Rwanda couldn't read.
Ah, so it was about reach.
Exactly. You could get into even the most remote communities with radio.
It's like creating a national conversation.
Yes. About healing, about reconciliation.
So powerful.
And all of this work, from individuals to communities to the leaders, it leads to this other big idea Staub and Perlman talked about: pluralism.
Okay, let's break down why that's so important, especially after genocide.
That's a great question, and actually a perfect place to pause for now.
Okay, so pluralism. Why is it so important in a place like Rwanda trying to heal after genocide?
You know, pluralism, it's really about embracing all those different voices.
Right, like diversity of thought.
Exactly. Different opinions, different backgrounds, just different ways of seeing the world.
And those differences are valued.
Exactly. Not just tolerated, but actually seen as a strength.
And why is that so important after genocide specifically?
Well, because after something so horrific, there's this really strong pull to create one single narrative.
Right, like this is the truth of what happened.
This is who is to blame, and while that makes sense, people want closure.
Yeah.
But it can be dangerous if it means shutting down anyone who disagrees.
So you're saying if only one narrative is allowed?
You risk missing the complexity.
And maybe repeating the same mistakes.
Exactly. Pluralism is about recognizing there isn't just one truth.
Multiple experiences.
Yeah, and a healthy society needs all of them.
It's about moving past that us versus them.
Yeah, and cultivating empathy, real understanding.
So how does a nation that's been so divided like Rwanda actually foster that?
Well, it starts with things like protecting free speech.
Making sure everyone has a voice.
Regardless of their background, their ethnicity, and education is huge.
Oh yeah, like teaching critical thinking.
Exactly, encouraging open discussion about tough topics.
So it's more than just laws and institutions.
It's a mindset, a culture that values those differences.
And that's hard to build.
Oh, absolutely, it's a constant balancing act.
Between that need for unity and the freedom to disagree.
Exactly.
Did Rwanda manage that balance?
You know, they made incredible strides in rebuilding, in promoting peace.
Yeah, they did.
But there were definitely concerns about limits on free speech, about political opposition being suppressed.
So even with good intentions, it's a tough road.
It really is. And this brings us to one of the things Staub and Perlman really emphasized.
Okay.
The responsibility of the international community to do more than just watch.
They were very critical of the world's inaction during the genocide.
They were. They said the world failed Rwanda.
So what does that mean for us? Not on that scale, but like as individuals, how do we not be bystanders?
It starts with awareness, learning the warning signs,
Of conflict, of these kinds of things.
and then having the courage to speak up,
even when it's uncomfortable.
especially when it's uncomfortable.
Challenging injustice, prejudice, wherever we see it.
Because it's not enough to just say, oh, that's terrible, and do nothing.
We have to be active.
Use our voices, our influence in whatever way we can.
And that can look like so many different things.
Supporting organizations, working on these issues, educating our own communities.
Even just having those hard conversations with family and friends who maybe,
Yeah, who have those biases.
who need to be challenged a bit.
It's not easy, but it matters.
So even though the Rwandan genocide might feel far away to some people listening,
The lessons are universal.
about human nature, about conflict,
And that's what's so powerful about Staub and Perlman's work.
they give us tools,
Yeah, to understand and address conflict at any level.
personal all the way up to global.
They remind us that peace, reconciliation, it's not just a dream.
It's a choice.
Choices we make every day.
This deep dive has given me a lot to think about.
Me too. It's heavy stuff.
It is, but so important and ultimately helpful, I think.
I think so too, because it shows change is possible.
Even after something so devastating.
Yeah.
Thank you for taking this journey with us, and we'll see you next time on The Deep Dive.